congratulations on making it this far. As of right now, you have a fully working to-do list. And so all we're going to do today is have a little bit of fun with this list. So we're just going to improve it, maybe add 1 or 2 features to it. And then by the end, we'll have a complete summary of everything that we've covered so far this week. Now, I have one very specific big feature that I have in mind that is actually going to require changes to multiple different parts of the code. The feature that I wanted to implement is the ability to separate the items that we have added today versus the items that we've added in the past. This way we can kind of keep track of a longer term and a short term list. So if you're interested in implementing this feature with me, then feel free to follow along. If you don't really care to implement this feature or you want to implement something else, then by all means feel free to do so. At this point, it is your app as much as it is mine, so you can kind of modify it however you'd like. Okay, so all we're going to do first in this section is modify our activity here, our main activity, to reflect the changes that we'll need. Once this is done, we can move on to the next section where we'll start implementing the functionality to reflect these changes. So basically our activity underscore main looks like this. We have our title, then the recycler view, and then the button down here. Now, rather than display an entirely new page for the items that we've shown in the past versus the ones for today, I think we'll use the same list. We'll just pass in a different data set depending on which list the person wants to display. And the way in which we'll switch between these lists is just going to be by using a couple of buttons up at the top. So I figure we can have kind of like a tab approach where we have one button here that displays today's items. So when the user presses this, it loads all of the items for today. And then there's going to be another button on the right. And when the user presses this, it loads all the items that we've done in the past. Okay. Now, there's actually a widget specially designed for this called the tab host. We're not going to bother using the tab host because it actually takes a little while to set up, and we already have a fully working UI. It's a lot easier just to have a couple of buttons, and it won't look quite as clean as the tab host, but we can still make it look pretty good. So, if we wanted to add these 2 buttons, I would suggest adding them inside of a linear layout, and that linear layout is going to go between our title and our recycler view. So, let me just see what kind of margins we have. There should be enough space that we can actually just put the buttons right underneath. We can adjust the margins later if we need to. So again, what I would recommend is a linear layout here. Let's just wrap the content for now. And then what we could do is have a couple of buttons inside. Okay, so let's just copy this and paste it. And again, the first button on the left is going to be used to represent the to-do items that we have for today. And then the button on the right can represent the to-do items that we added previously, so yesterday or even earlier than that. So rather than walk you through the whole process step by step, I'm actually going to let you guys go ahead and try to implement this kind of a setup yourself. We have a very similar example in our activity. No, I think it's the activity add item. Yeah, so it's going to be this layout here where I have a text view and a checkbox side by side within a linear layout. Maybe you'll want to follow a similar layout. It's going to look a little different from this towards the end, but the concepts are the same. Okay, so go ahead and give this a try. As per usual, feel free to pause the video now. In a few seconds, I'll show you kind of the solution that I came up with. Alright, so this is kind of what I've come up with here. I've filled in my linear layout and kind of glued the bottom of my text view to the top of the linear layout, glued the top of this to the bottom of this. I glued the bottom of this to the top of this guy, and then the top of this to the bottom of this so that everything lines up nicely. I also have a couple of buttons within this. I've specified some attributes here. Again, just a match parent, wrap content, one for the for the weight, and the one weight inside of a linear layout, if you have it for both of the items, indicates that they have the same weight, so they kind of fill up the remaining space. All right. I specified just a couple of color resources. So if we go to colors, I have a pure black and a pure white, and this is just exactly that, a pure black and pure white color. And I specified those, added the text size and some text, which I just specified through some string resources, just created these down at the bottom here. So we can go ahead and close those up. And also just gave our background a bit of a color as well, just so we can distinguish between that black and white. So go ahead and give this a look through. Yours doesn't have to look exactly like this, but this is kind of what the final product ends up looking like. As this background color, and then again that black and white theme. So I kind of like this white text on black and then black text on white. We can kind of use this to determine which one is selected. Okay, so we'll just kind of switch back and forth between these two. In order to help us determine which color we're using through the code, I would recommend that this time you actually do add some color resources and you use those in the background attribute. Okay. So with that being said, we just need to connect these buttons to the corresponding code, and that's going to be in main activity. So let's go ahead and switch over there now, and we'll just create a couple of functions to help us to actually determine which list we're displaying here. So we're going to create some public functions. The first is going to be something like display today's items. It's going to take in again a view of type view. We'll implement that a little later. And then we're going to copy this and paste it, and instead of display today's items, this will be display the past items. Now we need to actually call these. Like I said, we can attach them through onClick listeners, now that you know exactly how to do that, or we can go to activity main and just specify those onClicks through the buttons. So we'll just specify an onClick equal to display today's items, and then the onClick down at the bottom here equal to display past items. Okay, cool. So if we head on over to main activity, now these functions should be blacked out instead of grayed out. And with that, I think we can actually go ahead and end the section here. All I wanted to do was modify our UI a little bit to take that into account. I guess what we could also do is maybe add a date field to our custom to-do item. So if we go to our to-do item layout, right now we just have these two text views, and it looks a little like this. What we could do is actually display the item date as well. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Let's just modify this custom constraint layout to actually take that into account. So not only will we have these two text views here, but we'll also have a third text view that will be used to display our date. So go ahead and try to implement that yourself. I'll again show you my solution in just a few seconds here. Alright, so this is pretty much what I've come up with here. I had to make a fair few modifications, just kind of modified the way the constraints are for all three of these items. So this is the text view I added. We'll get back to that in just a second. Just take note of the constraint layout modifications I made here. Also increased my text size just a little bit. Added a vertical weight so that it's not taking up the entire top to bottom space, but only 75% off it. Basically still gluing the right to the left of this guy, the top to the top of the parent, but this time I'm gluing the bottom to the top of my text view down here. Now take note of this text view. Again, bottom to the bottom of the parent, top to the top of the parent. I'm gluing the left to the right of this guy, but not left to the right of this guy, okay? So it's only going to be glued to this. Other than that, no real changes here, but this is entirely new. Basically just specified a width and height of 0dp because I want it to completely conform to these constraints. Bottom to parent, left to parent, right to the left of my urgency text view, so it's just going to glue those two together. And then the top of this is just going to be glued to the bottom of my very top text view here. I also added a text color of just a kind of a fairly dark gray, slightly lesser text size, center of gravity, and let's see how that looks. Okay, so it now just takes our date into account. So we'll display the item name a little bigger and then just the date below it. So I'm not sure exactly how this is going to look within the list. We'll have to wait and see. I also just increased the height by 10 dp, so it's 80 instead of 70. So there aren't any on-clicks or anything that we need to connect. In fact, we don't even need to get the items by their IDs. These were just for the constraints. The only modification we might need to make in our to-do items adapter, which is of course attached to our to-do item layout, is going to be to also get that additional text view that we just added. Now we have the name, and the urgency text view will probably also want the date text view as well. So what we could do is actually just connect that right now. Let's just copy and paste this. This is going to be our date text view. It's going to be constraint layout.getChild at index 2, so this is the third child in the overall scheme of things. And then we're just going to set our date text equal to this, so our date text view dot text is going to be equal to our to-do items list at the position. So this is just going to get the currently selected item, and we're going to post the date as a string. So that's just about all the display we need. We can actually save this and wrap this section up. So in this section, we just kind of modified our layout files a little bit, made some modifications to activity_main to take that into account. So now it has these extra two buttons, added that nice color in the background, and added the on clicks for these. In our to-do item layout, we added this third text view down at the bottom here, which is going to be used to display our date, so each of the items will look like this instead of how it looked previously. So now what we're going to do in this section coming right up is we're going to actually implement the functionality that will help us to display these two different lists. So we're going to need to take the date into account. Basically, if the date displayed on any of these items matches today's date exactly, then we'll display it in today's list. And if that date is different from today, then we'll display it in the previous items list. Otherwise, the functionalities are going to be exactly the same. The only real difference is in the data that we're using to populate it in our adapter here. So, if you're feeling brave, then you can try to accomplish this task yourself. Think about it this way. When we retrieve items from our database, we'll now need to take the date into account rather than just the name and urgency, and we can use that as kind of a sorting mechanism. We'll also need to get the date for today and see if any of the items that we've retrieved, see if their dates match today's date. If they do, then we'll add it to today's item list, and if they don't, we'll add it to tomorrow's item list. Then we just essentially choose which one of the lists we want to attach to our adapter, and we can do that within these functions here. Okay, so those are your basic guidelines. Like I said, please go ahead and try it yourself if you want. If you don't really want to try that yourself, that's totally cool as well. We'll provide the solution and we'll kind of go through most of the steps with you in the next section anyway.